cover what is a private lender, what does it mean to be the bank, what are the 7 advantages of being a private lender. We're going to look at traditional financing versus being a private lender. How are they the same? How are they different? What is a promissory note? I think everybody in here knows what a promissory note is. Probably don't need to spend a lot of time on that. Why we focus on performing promissory notes versus non-performing. Private lending risks. Now guess what? Everything we do in life has risks, you know. And what you do is how you become successful is you know how to mitigate those risks. So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've got a risk-free investment for you, I think everybody in here is pretty savvy enough to know there is no such thing. You know? Then we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about retiree challenges and the need for income. Where do most people invest today? And then I'll go in and tell you about our company and how we do business, how we mitigate risk in our business, benefits of being a private lender with the Passive Income Network. We got some case studies we'll go through, and then why private lending secured by a hard asset is great for retirement accounts. And if you like what you see, how you can participate. This is not meant to be a sales pitch, but it's an educational event. And then we'll do a quick wrap up, and then I really want to give time to allow you to ask questions. So, all right, so let me get moving. I'm going to move through some of this pretty quick. Who in here is totally new, doesn't know anything about private lending? Okay, you guys, come on, you're killing me. All right, so I'm gonna breeze through this first part pretty quick. So we all know what a private lender is. You're private, you're a non-bank, you're not taking in people's deposits and then lending those out. That's what a bank does. And there are individual private lenders, like most of us in here are individuals, or there's companies, like our company, Passive Income Network, is a private lending company. So you can see the various people that fit into that area. There is a national organization of American Association of Private Lenders. There's also a couple of other smaller groups. I go to some of those meetings. But I don't participate on the national level. I go to some of their meetings just to network and make some connections to the people there. So let's talk about some of the advantages of private lending. The one thing is it's historically proven. You know, it stood the test of time. There are actually ancient records going back to 3000 BC when they showed that private lending agreements were there. And how did people get paid? They got paid in things like commodities, like silver and cattle and wheat and things like that. So it's been around for a long time. And John Powell, during the Great Depression, he was a big investor in the stock market. He totally left the stock market and went into private lending to avoid that volatility there. So another thing, it's predictable returns. Again, unlike the stock market, can you predict your returns? You can't. Some years are good, some years are not. When private lending, you know how much you've lent, you know how much the interest rate is, you know how long it takes to get your money back, and you know your payment you're going to be receiving. And it's excellent cash flow. I mean, everybody in here clearly understands the advantage of amortization, right? I mean, if you take a normal loan on amortization and just say 5 years, the money you collect in 5 years, 2/3 of that money is income. 1/3 of it is return of your principal. So you get your income really fast up front. Most loans don't go most real estate type loans don't go the full 20, 30 years anyway. So. And diversification, you know, the stock market and the bond market, they've done a great job. So that's what a lot of people talk about, is doing that. But private lending allows you to kind of diversify your funds and look at a different asset class, an asset class that's not driven by the market fluctuations. And we all know our favorite thing is secured. Most private loans are secured by a tangible asset. So what does that mean? If the person doesn't keep their promise and make their payments, you've got an asset you can go take to recover your investment. And a lot of us, and this is one thing that I enjoy too much, a lot also, is helping borrowers achieve their goals. A lot of these major building projects, I'm not familiar with what's going on out here, but a lot of these strip centers and things like that are built, most of that is done through private money. But it's big private money. It's like millions of dollars, you know. And the little guy, most of us didn't know about that. But the way we're doing private lending, we work more with the individual investors. And then there's the personal satisfaction and impact. There is something satisfying about when you can contribute to your own community, businesses, small business in your community, and helping with real estate projects. Well, I said there were 7 advantages, but I added an 8th one. Okay, the 8th one is you're going to look like a genius. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about traditional financing. By the way, I have a little bit of a back issue, so I'm going to sit down every once in a while, if you guys don't mind. Okay. So in traditional financing, and let me see if this pointer will work here. Okay. So that didn't last long sitting down. So, and we're talking real estate here. Basically, you got a buyer, a seller, bank, and you got an escrow title company in the middle that's kind of the referee, make sure everything runs right, checks for, make sure there's liens are cleared and things like that. So the way that process works, the buyer says, seller, I want to buy your house, but they need the funds to pay off that existing loan and the seller proceeds. So where do they get the funds? The funds come in from a bank. Buyer has to provide back that promise to pay, the promissory note. The seller provides clear title. Now I'm simplifying this, okay? But that's really how lending works. So how is that different when you're a private lender? There's basically one difference. There's no bank involved. You are the bank. Everything else works the same. It's incredible. And I'm sure a number of you have run into talking to people when you tell them, I'm doing private lending. Have you ever had anybody say, oh, that's illegal, you can't do that? Yeah, I can tell from the laughs that's happened. But that's how simple it is. All right, so I'm going to breeze through this. Everybody knows what a promissory note is, right? I promise to make these payments on time until I pay the loan off. So how are investments protected? Basically, in the western part of the country, it's a deed of trust. In the eastern part of the country, it's a mortgage. You know? A lot of us in here are doing manufactured or mobile homes. So what? I don't know if you use a similar process in California, but we use a title, much like a car title, and this is a copy of the car title. You probably can't read that printing, but it shows at the bottom of that title, Affordable Housing Loans is the lien holder, you know. So those are your protection for your investment. So types of promissory notes. A performing note is, hey, you're getting income coming into your account every month. People are making the payments. Non-performing notes, in other words, is when somebody goes into a default or they get in a situation where they can't pay. Now, we all know we all invest in notes because we're looking for income, right? And some of you may even look for non-performing notes that you can buy. Not a lot of those today. There were a lot back in the 2008, 9, 10, 11 time frame. And a lot of investors bought those non-performing notes as a backdoor approach to get the property. Really, because you were buying them at such a discount, 40, 50% of discount, and they really wanted to get it in foreclose. So that's why most people buy non-performing notes. Don't see a lot of those today. And then there's a thing called a reperforming note. And this is a note that's been in default, and maybe the borrowers were still living in the house. So you modify the loan and get it to be performing again. Now, I ran into a company about a year ago that was out touting they're selling reperforming notes. Well, what they do, they would modify the loan. There wasn't one payment that had come in yet. They're selling it as a reperforming note. Now, we all know that's not a reperforming note, right? You know, my gauge is I'd like to see 6 months to see that the payments are being made again. So be careful if you run into that type of person. So why we focus on performing notes? Again, it's all about income. It's about monthly cash flow. It's about controlling the asset. You guys all know that. No cost of ownership. No tenants, toilets, and termites. And as far as I'm concerned, note investing, in my opinion, is one of the absolute best investments you can make in a retirement account. And because you're not depending on that income. So if somebody doesn't make a payment, it's okay. It's okay. You've got your asset there protecting your investment. You know, when people come to us and talk about investing with us, one of the first questions I ask, are you planning on living on the money from this note? Do you need to eat from this? And they say, well, yeah. I said, well, it probably may not be for you then, really, because there are risks, and we're going to talk about those risks. So we're very clear on that. And we like the idea of passive income. That's why we named our company the Passive Income Network. Years ago, I don't even know where I got the training from, but somebody told me, if you're in business, you know, don't name your company Chase and Associates. What does that mean? Try to name your company what you do. And that's why we named them Passive Income Network, Affordable Housing Loans. We're trying to say our name says what we do. Okay, let's talk about risks on performing notes. So the number one risk is the borrower quits paying. Well, again, you've got an asset there, you know, and you've got to make sure you go through good underwriting, and I'll go through that in a couple of slides here. The collateral not valued properly, because it's all about loan to value. It's not loan to unpaid balance. We all know that. You know, when there were a lot of bad notes out there, people would say, "Hey, I got this note. The unpaid balance is $100,000, you know, and I'm going to sell it to you for $60,000." Well, it doesn't mean anything until you know the value of the collateral. So if the value of the collateral is 100, you're okay. The value of the collateral is 50, you're not. So it's really, really important you know the value of the collateral. And then make sure to check for liens on the property. That's why I say use a title or escrow company, because they will help you through that. On the manufactured housing, we don't close unless we have a clear title, you know. And there's some tricks that people try to play with these titles. You probably ran into them where they don't have the latest title. They got one before that. So you got to look at those dates in there. When did it sell? Do they coincide? You know, do your due diligence on that. And the collateral not properly insured. Today in our loans, when we started out, we started doing the manufactured home loans a little over 8 years ago. And we never escrowed taxes and insurance, because it was such a small amount compared to real estate. Well, about a year and a half ago, we changed that. We started escrowing now, because the insurance costs, and I'm sure everybody knows what's happening with insurance, is just getting out of control. So the borrowers would say, well, I don't need insurance. I'm going to go without it. They don't understand. We need insurance to cover that collateral. So we were doing a lot of forced place insurance, not a lot, but I mean on those ones that didn't pay it. And now what we found in the insurance companies, some of the insurance companies have come and said, I'm sorry, you can't buy insurance on this because you don't own this home. I said, wait a minute, we're the lien holder. Oh, sorry. So we then have to repossess the home legally. We don't boot the people out, but we legally put it back in our name. So we just started escrowing to avoid all those issues. So now we do escrowing. And so we put that all in a trust account, and the bill comes to us, and we make sure the bill gets paid. So closing without a title company with real estate, and closing without a valid title on manufactured homes. So we know the risk. What do we do to mitigate them? What do we do to balance out that risk reward? So we've all heard location, 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 right? Where's the collateral located? Is it a place where you don't want to live? Is it in what we call the hood? Something- Is that the right term? I know I'm a little dated here, but, you know. Yeah, rough areas, thank you. Let's be politically correct, right? So where is it located is important. And then I already touched on this a little bit, evaluating it, evaluating the collateral. And it's not just looking at the condition of the collateral, where it's at, the condition, the valuation of it, making sure you got that all right. And then evaluating the borrower. The three key areas are debt to income calculation, their credit, and then their ability to repay. Has anybody heard the ATR term, ability to repay? Okay, that's what came out from Dodd-Frank. And so you just got to make sure you're doing your homework on that and qualify them on that. Debt to income ratio, we don't go any higher than 45% on ours. Some VA goes over 50% on loans, so and I think Fannie Mae is 43%, so we're right in there at 45%. Down payment's a big one. I've seen people when I was buying loans before we started originating them, where they'd give somebody a huge loan with hardly any down payment. Well, there's data that shows that people will default quicker without skin in the game than they will with a bad credit score. You know, so you got to make sure you have a decent down payment. And then if you're buying an existing note, look at the payment history and get a professional payment history. Somebody just gives you an Excel spreadsheet with the numbers they put in it. Can you trust that? No. If there's a professional servicing company, you get a report from the servicing company, yeah, you can pretty much trust that. Yes. I'm okay as long as we, yeah, as long as somebody, go ahead, yeah.
Oh, it's okay, I have like several, so I'll just wait.
Okay. She's saving them up. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about retiree challenges. And the reason I want to talk about this is the majority of the investors who work with us are people who are in or near retirement. They're fed up with the stock market volatility, and to be honest, they can't afford to take a big hit if the stock market takes a 25% cut or anything. And they want to get better returns than what they can get in the money market. So that's why I talk a lot about retiree challenges. I did a lot of research on this. There's a lot of studies out there. Here's one from just a few months ago by MoneyWatch. It said, this study finds that Americans are more scared of going broke in retirement than they are of death itself. June 15th, Alliance Insurance Company said 61% of Americans are more afraid of running out of money in old age than they are of dying. July 25th, 23, Wealth Ramp, pre-retirees always worry about the monster under the bed. Boy, that sounds ominous. Running out of money in retirement. That's Pam Kruger of Wealth Ramp. What's funny, I did this same type of research over a decade ago, and nothing has changed in 10 years.